So I wanted to tell the story about the development of the leadership seminar and also some of the other investments that have come from that. It started out with some slow developing research blues. I only gradually picked up students. My first student was Stacy McElroy, and I think she started with me her second year. And then I added one at a time after that, maybe one or two. So it wasn't for a few years before we had a team of 3 or 4 doc students. And so my first couple of years, we had a lot of master students involved because I really wanted to have a team feel. And it took a little while to figure out what was going to work, how to structure things. And this was a bit of a carryover from even days at VCU. Josh and Daryl and I wanted to develop our skills as mentors. We liked that role, but we didn't really know what we were doing. Kind of reminds me of the story I was sitting in Ev's office, and we would kind of just talk about whatever was coming up. I would leave with at least 6 hours of work every time I met with him, but it felt very relaxed when I was with him, and it was a space that I could kind of talk about whatever I was thinking about. And so at the time I was like, it must be nice, Ev, to have doc students who can do a lot of your work for you. And Ev just kind of laughed. He's like, yeah, talk to me in about 8 years. And then he kind of explained that it usually took a while. It takes a while before working with doc students, and mentoring kind of has accumulating effect on productivity. That's not why people like working with doc students. It's not to hand off work. It's an investment in training and a desire to bring other people into the work. But the payoff it takes a while. So Josh and Daryl and I decided that we were going to try our hand at mentoring. So we brought in some undergrads to work with the team, and that's a story for another day, and probably one that you should hear from Daryl. So if you get a chance to ever talk with Daryl, ask him about some of our early days trying to bring undergraduates into our work. But what ended up happening my first couple years was I spent all year with like 8 students trying to come up with research projects that they could do, design a study. And in my mind, this is something, okay, we'll just lay out a study. I had gotten it down to where it took maybe like an hour to submit an IRB if I knew what I was doing. But with this group, most people didn't ever finish anything, and that was of no fault of their own. We just didn't quite have a good structure. But there were 3 or 4 students that kind of battled through it, designed a study, we got their data. I kind of worked to set up the SONA system to kind of get that going and kind of create a streamlined way of getting data. But as I got further along, and as I got kind of closer to tenure, I started to realize that some of the longstanding structures of our department in terms of support for research were not necessarily amenable to helping people develop strong research programs. And I was kind of holding side by side my experience at VCU versus what Stacy seemed to experience. And there were at least 2 kind of major differences. One advantage I had was I was at VCU and there was a connection with the business school. And so Dr. Larry Williams, who's since moved on to somewhere else, but he was there, and he had started a methodology series where he would invite some of the top methodologists in the country, the people who kind of created the statistics used for SEM, or, they had developed the approach, but they also were really invested in teachers, and most of them were really good teachers. And so he would bring these people in to give talks once a month. And so there was a course where you could kind of sit in on those and get some additional instruction. And then he offered several courses, and then he also offered short courses that would happen twice a year. And so even though our multivariate stat sequence was okay, and we had one, and it was in person, that wasn't where I learned most of the methodological stuff that kind of helped me do well during my third and fourth year. It was actually the opportunity to take those other courses, some of the short courses. I took one on structural equation modeling, then I took an advanced course. I took one on meta-analysis, and then I also got exposed to a variety of methods through that methodology series. So that was one difference. In the college, we've got a number of online courses that cover the basic sequence, and although that's an okay way to cover the content, the problem is there's a lack of contextualization to the writing process, and you probably don't really know how to do something until you've done it, applied it in your area of work. And so we have a application gap in our program. The other challenge that I noticed is our practicum sequence wasn't ideally set up for people who are wanting to go into academia. So at VCU, I came in, and my first practicum was an on-site clinic, and so it was right down the street. They got us about 4 or 5 clients per week. The supervision was there, right there on campus, and there was a group meeting, like a staff meeting that we attended. So we were able to get about 5 hours per week, and the time spent on that aspect of work was less than 10 hours. The other part was that, so we had a solid relationship with the University Counseling Center, which had an APA-approved site, and so it was a high-quality site, specialization in group psychotherapy. And so that was an excellent placement. And then it was really only during that third year of practicum, which ended up being your fourth year, that was when you were kind of turned out to the broader community, and they kind of had a breakfast where you'd meet with different places, and based on where you were applying for internship, you might pick specialized site. If you wanted to be in the VA, you'd probably try a VA, so forth and so on. And so that year, you kind of knew that you were going to be doing more hours. It was going to be more like 15 to 20. So at Georgia State, we don't currently have a strong relationship with the University Counseling Center. We don't have anything formally set up for that to be kind of a early practicum. We really don't have an established first year practicum to kind of observe people's skills and kind of see where they are, help them clarify their career goals before they're investing a lot of time. And so what we kind of have is we have the equivalent of that third year. It's kind of a free-for-all. For people who are considering academic careers, that's a problem. The problem is many of the sites would require driving that might take, each day you're there, at least an hour if you're driving 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. So that's time. And then many of the places can get sufficient clinical hours, maybe somewhere in the 8 to 15 range. Many of the places have high demands in terms of clinical hours, and in order to hit those demands, the trainee has to be on site even more. So it's not uncommon to hear our students being on site for 20 hours or more. And in a 40 to 50 hour work week, and we know that once you get much above 50, you're just spinning your wheels. That doesn't leave a lot of time. And so the time's not being protected very well, particularly the proportion of hours, direct hours, which are needed to kind of be competitive for internship. You probably need at least 500. Some places will count prior master's work, some places won't. So this was another barrier that I saw Stacy kind of struggle with, and it probably wasn't until her later years where she was freed up enough from courses and heavy demands of practicum and the combination of that to where she was getting the kinds of large chunks of time for writing that I realized I had for almost all of my training period. So at one point, our dean was had observed the chairs. We're bringing in applicants that are really strong. They have many times 15 to 20 publications. How are they doing that? I mean, we have Dean's Fellowship structures to possibly facilitate that, and I'm not sure that even under ideal conditions that our doctoral students are hitting that mark. So what are the kinds of structural changes we may need to make as a college and in our department to promote an environment that's more conducive to training researchers? So these were the research blues. That's the gist of it.